In late 1872, the brigantine Mary Celeste set out from New York Harbor on what looked like a straightforward commercial run. She headed for Genoa, Italy, a familiar route for an American merchant vessel. There was nothing experimental about the plan and nothing daring about the schedule. The ship was provisioned, the papers were in order, and the crew list was full. This voyage began as routine work. Command rested with Captain Benjamin Briggs, an experienced seaman trusted with both ship and cargo. He did not sail alone. His wife and young daughter travelled with him, turning the crossing into a family passage as well as a business trip. That choice mattered because it changed the stakes of every decision at sea. A captain could risk himself, but he also had to protect them. Responsibility was now personal. In the hold, the Mary Celeste carried industrial alcohol, packed for shipment to buyers in Europe. It was valuable cargo, but it also demanded care because it could leak, it could give off fumes, and it could turn small mistakes into serious trouble. Still, on departure day, it was simply another contracted load, sealed and stowed for the crossing. The lines were cast off, and the ship cleared the harbor for open Atlantic water. A few days out from the American coast, the Atlantic stopped cooperating. Winter seas built fast, and the ship no longer moved like a steady platform. Work that felt routine at departure turned into constant correction. Sails had to be handled more often, not for speed, but for control. Course changes came in small, careful steps. The crossing still looked possible. It just demanded more attention, hour after hour. Rough weather did more than slow progress. It altered the daily rhythm that kept everyone functioning. Watches lasted the same length, but they felt longer when every roll threatened a slip or a mistake. Water swept the deck, and anything unsecured became a problem that had to be fixed immediately. Navigation turned cautious. When the sky stayed closed with cloud, position estimates relied more on time and direction than on clear sightings. That kind of uncertainty created a quiet pressure. A ship could handle heavy seas, but decisions had consequences that did not show up right away. Pushing hard risked damage to rigging. Taking too much sail risked losing the ability to steer. And every adjustment affected the timeline, the expected landfall, and the margin for error. The voyage continued, but it did not feel like a simple crossing anymore. It started to feel like management. After days of hard weather, routine checks became more than habit. The crew needed to know what the ship had absorbed and what it had survived. Then an unsettling sign appeared below. Water sat where it should not have been, gathered in the hold. It did not take much to change the mood. At sea, unexplained water meant one thing first. The ship might have started to lose its fight against the ocean. They measured it, watched it, and tried to judge whether it stayed level or crept higher. That decision mattered. If the leak worsened, the ship could have become heavy, sluggish, and dangerous to handle in rough waves. If it reached the cargo, it introduced another risk. Damaged containers, shifting weight, and a vessel that no longer balanced the way its crew expected. The problem was simple to name, but hard to read in time. Every hour forced a new calculation. How much water could be managed and how quickly things could turn. The sea did not announce a deadline, but it punished hesitation. Men who had handled storms now faced uncertainty, and uncertainty made ordinary choices feel urgent. If the water kept coming, staying aboard stopped being a routine commitment and started becoming a gamble. A ship could look seaworthy on deck and still be failing silently underneath. The water in the hold changed the crew's thinking from concern to calculation. They did not know if the leak stayed steady or worsened with each wave. So they began acting as if time mattered. The lifeboat became more than equipment on deck. It became an option. They checked it, readied it, and treated it like the next step could happen without warning. Then came the practical choices that showed how serious the situation felt. They gathered the items that meant survival and control, navigation tools, supplies, and the ship's papers that proved who they were and what they carried. They did not pack for comfort. They packed for a clean break. If they left, they needed to stay together, know their position, and be able to explain everything later. Once those essentials sat ready, the decision was no longer abstract. Preparing the boat forced a question. Was it safer to gamble on the ship or on the sea? Every minute spent assembling gear suggested their confidence in the hull had dropped. This was a threshold moment. They had not abandoned the brigantine yet, but they behaved like people who might do it next. The preparations reached their point of no return. The crew committed to the lifeboat, and then they left the ship behind. Whatever judgment they made, it treated the Mary Celeste as a danger they could not stay with. That single choice changed everything. A working ocean vessel, still capable of sailing, suddenly had no hands to steer, no one to correct its course, and no way to call for help. From that moment, the Mary Celeste kept moving only because wind and sea pushed it onward. With no one aboard, small problems could not get fixed. A shift in weather could not be answered. A change in sail could not be made. The ship did not stop, and it did not turn back. It simply drifted through busy waters as an unmanned hazard, while the people who left it faced the ocean in a boat built for short distances. Out on open sea, separation became the real threat. The lifeboat and the ship could not stay together unless someone controlled one of them, and nobody controlled the Mary Celeste anymore. Minutes could have turned into miles. Once that distance opened up, the larger ship kept going, and the smaller boat became almost impossible to find. The result was brutal in its simplicity. A ship sailed on alone, and its passengers disappeared. On December the 5th, 1872, another merchant ship, the Dei Gratia, sailed through the Atlantic lanes between the Azores and Portugal. The crew noticed a brigantine ahead that did not behave like a normal vessel under command. It drifted and wandered, changing its angle to the wind in ways that suggested nobody corrected the course. A decision followed quickly. They moved closer to identify it, then prepared men to board. The name on the stern matched a ship they recognized, Mary Celeste. That should have ended the uncertainty, but it raised a worse question. Why did it sit out here alone? A boarding party climbed aboard, expecting at least one sailor or some signal of sickness or emergency. Instead, they found no one, no captain, no crew, no family. The ship still floated and still carried its cargo, but the people who should have been on deck were simply gone. The men searched with purpose, not for atmosphere, but for answers that made sense at sea. They checked for signs of a fight, for damage that explained abandonment, for clues that a storm had smashed the vessel or that pirates had stripped it. The basics did not match those fears. The Mary Celeste remained seaworthy enough to drift on, and that contradiction hit hard. A ship did not stay this intact while every person vanished without a trace. The men from the Dei Gratia did not just find an empty ship, they claimed it. Under the sea laws of the time, a vessel found abandoned could earn a reward if it was brought to safety. So they put a small prize crew aboard and began towing the Mary Celeste toward the nearest place with authority and paperwork. Gibraltar became the destination because that was where a salvage claim could be made official. The tow turned the mystery into a risk. Storms, currents, and the simple strain of dragging another ship meant both vessels had to keep moving, keep control, and keep the Mary Celeste from being lost for good. Every mile mattered, because the value of the salvage depended on delivering the ship and cargo in recognizable condition. By the time Gibraltar came into reach, the question was no longer only where the crew went. It was who would get paid and who would be blamed. Once the Mary Celeste entered Gibraltar's jurisdiction, the case stopped being just a strange sea story. Officials treated it as a legal event, and the salvagers filed their formal claim for compensation. That immediately triggered scrutiny. The ship had to be examined, the story had to be tested, and the actions of the men who found it had to be weighed. Salvage law demanded proof, not impressions. The drifting vessel became evidence, and the sea mystery moved into a courtroom. In Gibraltar, the case stopped being a simple salvage question and turned into something sharper. Officials looked at an empty ship and asked an uncomfortable thing. Did someone make the crew disappear? They treated the Mary Celeste like a crime scene at sea. Every rope, hatch and cabin detail mattered because it showed intent or panic, and the people who brought her in now faced suspicion too. That changed the whole tone of the inquiry. Investigators searched for signs of a fight, a takeover, or a staged abandonment. They checked whether anything valuable went missing and whether the ship's condition matched a sudden attack. They examined the lifeboat situation and what had been removed in haste versus what stayed behind. Then they turned to the cargo, industrial alcohol. If it leaked, it could explain fear. If it was tampered with, it could suggest fraud. Either way, the barrels became evidence. The ship's papers and log entries became the timeline everyone leaned on. Officials read them line by line, looking for the last clear position, the last routine note, and any gap that felt wrong. They compared those entries to the ship's actual state when found, how much water was in the hold, what supplies remained, what tools were left out. Each mismatch raised new questions. Mutiny, murder, or a con all stayed on the table as the inspection tightened. As the inspections went on, the simplest question kept coming back. Where was the proof of violence? There were no clear signs of a struggle, no obvious bloodshed, no damaged cargo that screamed robbery. The more investigators looked for a villain, the less they found. And when that happened, the story began to pivot. Maybe nobody attacked the ship at all. Maybe the danger came from something the crew carried with them every day. That cargo of industrial alcohol now looked less like freight and more like a trigger. Alcohol could leak, and its fumes could spread without anyone seeing it. In a closed space, fumes meant one fear above all others: explosion. The crew did not need flames to panic. They only needed the suspicion that a spark, a lantern, even a simple mistake could blow the ship apart. Leaving the vessel for a short time could have felt like the safest move. So the focus shifted to an accident that unfolded fast. The lifeboat got readied, supplies got gathered, and an evacuation began that may never have been meant as permanent. But the sea did not forgive small errors. If the boat stayed attached by a line, a sudden swell could have snapped it or dragged it wide. If the line got cut in haste, the separation became final. The ship kept sailing. The people did not. Over time, the Mary Celeste stopped being just a salvage case and became a label people recognized instantly: ghost ship. The facts stayed stubbornly plain: an able vessel, a missing crew, no clear violence, yet the story kept growing in the telling. Each new retelling pulled it further from the paperwork and closer to legend. And that distance mattered because it changed what people expected the answer to look like. In later years, writers and speakers reshaped small gaps into big certainties. Some accounts added drama that had never been proven. Others treated rumours like evidence, then passed them on as if they were in the record. In response, debunkers worked in the opposite direction, stripping away the inventions and forcing attention back to what could actually be supported. The same case produced two forces at once: exaggeration and correction. Modern investigators approached it like a reconstruction, not a campfire story. They tested timelines, weighed how fast a drifting ship could separate from a small boat, and asked what panic did to decision-making at sea. They focused on ordinary causes with deadly outcomes, fumes, fear, and a choice made under pressure. That contrast remained the final twist. A voyage that began as routine in 1872 ended as the world's most famous disappearance.